Well, sort of. Hey, Shipping Pod fans. I'll tell you a little story real quick before we start the show. Apple just put out an announcement that Apple Podcasts, you have to remove the word episode from the title of every single one of your shows. So, I had to open up my old Shipping Pod feed as well as my other podcasts that I do and make sure episode was pulled out from them. I wish I'd known that 122 podcast episodes ago before I started doing all of this. It would have saved me some keystrokes, but it was a blessing in disguise. And I'll tell you why. Because it gave me the opportunity to go into Libsyn and see the statistics and see the feed. And I was amazed by all of the activity on there. I haven't produced a new show for the Shipping Pod in, I think over a year at least. You guys may know better than I do. The Shipping Pod lives on as Consulting Logistics. It's a weekly logistics show. Generally every Monday, there's a new episode out. We have great guests on there. Just had Craig Fuller from Freight Waves. Well, guys, here's the thing. If you like this feed, do you want me to continue to co-brand these? I don't have a problem releasing the Consulting Logistics content on this feed if it's more accessible to you, because the end game here is to learn together. Let me know. Send me an email at tdooner@abornandco.com. That's TDOONER@abornandco.com. If you want Consulting Logistics episodes released on the Shipping Pod feed on a weekly basis, let me know if there's demand for it. We'd be happy to do it. The more ears we reach, the better. Either way, I just wanted to thank you guys so much for your support. It's been, over 2 years now that we've been working on these shows. This show celebrated its 2-year anniversary in January. And, here is my anniversary gift to you guys.
Prepare for takeoff, please.
It's the Shipping Pod. You're listening to Consulting Logistics, presented by Aborn and Company. I'm your host, Tim Dooner. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome back, everybody. Today, we got a bit of a weird one for you. Well, maybe not weird, but a little bit of a different speed. I'm going to have Adam Erickson from Hulft Inc. on, and we're going to talk about some of the myths and truths behind technology that's coming into the supply chain. Adam was not raised in a supply chain environment like many of us. He actually has a very strong tech background, though. So it's going to be really interesting to hear his approach to some of these problems and some of these solutions that we talk about today. He also did time in Japan. Been all over the world, a well-traveled gentleman. I'm expecting great things, and I know he brings a lot of energy. And also, before we go to the call, if you tuned in last week, Craig Fuller was on, CEO of Freight Waves. It's an excellent episode. Go back and check that one out if you missed it. And there he is already. Adam is dialing in. Let's pull him on the air. Adam, welcome to the show. I know that you're doing well today.
Thank you, sir. As always, any day you wake up this side of the dirt, it's an awesome day to behold.
I like it. To the audience, just a quick brief on Adam. He's a UCLA graduate, and look, I can say go Bruins without being a homer, because, that's UCLA, not just the Boston Bruins out here.
That is correct, and as far as I understand it, we no longer play collegiate hoops basketball, so we're doing well.
Is that true, or is that a joke? I don't follow college hoops.
Well, no one that follows UCLA college hoops follows it anymore anyway, so, but thank you for the shout out to my alma mater.
All right, before I get off track here, though, let me just give some background on you, because you have a really interesting one. You have probably a much different background than a lot of my usual guests. We talk about technology quite a bit, but you've gotten pretty deep in the muck. You worked with biometrics at NextGen ID. You got your hands dirty with augmented reality, virtual reality, and IoT at MaxPlay. You dove even deeper into IoT at Device Authority, and now you're the Vice President of Sales at Hulft Inc. Let's start there before we hop in the time machine. What's your elevator pitch on Hulft, and what's your role there?
My role has always been I help commercialize technologies and generate that thing called revenue, which is often needed to make this other strange thing called payroll. Hulft Inc. is a U.S. startup, but it's actually a subsidiary of a Japanese parent company. The Japanese parent company is named Saison Information Systems. Been around 25 years, listed on Tokyo Stock Exchange, and started off in the very sexy business of managed file transfers, meaning it helped Japanese credit card companies and banks get information from point A to point B very securely. And over time, it morphed into a data integration platform because as the company was moving stuff from point A to point B, banking customers, manufacturing customers, et cetera, said, can you help us extract some of this stuff, make it more useful in my other systems? So the company expanded over the years to eventually having 10,000 customers, 43 countries. That said, the United States was open territory. So as part of an expansion strategy, they founded a subsidiary in the United States. I was hired in April of 2018 to help bring it forward because my background is I am an enterprise software startup junkie. So this is my sixth enterprise software startup software that I'm bringing to market, and ultimately within the realm of I've got 10,000 customers worldwide in the context of the U.S. customer set. It's always the same thing. What problem are we solving? What's the value of the problem that we're solving? How do we have conversations with people about the problem we can solve? And then ultimately where we're differentiating the market is we're not the sexiest thing out there, but much like one of our largest customers in the world, Toyota, we are stable, we're reliable, and we always get you where you need to go.
How dare you say my Camry isn't sexy?
well, it depends what accoutrement you have in it. If you got the cup holders and you upgrade the stereo system and the kid seat in the back, well, then now you've got the American dream going.
You know, the truth is I actually have a Honda, but I didn't want you to, get in trouble with your account over there. But Toyota's.
Well, Honda's also our global account. You named the Japanese manufacturer, and we have them on the customer book. So it's a great reference point simply because, again, in the context of the United States, we're not known. There are a lot of bigger brand names out there doing data integration and other stuff, but it's not easy to make a reputation in the Japanese and Asia Pac markets if you can't deliver on what you say you can do. So we're proud of referencing that. So we'll take your Honda, we'll take a Mazda, we'll take a Subaru, we'll take whatever we can get because ultimately they're our customers.
Very nice, very nice. My yellow Honda is safe. Bumblebee approved. Hey, man, so I mentioned your tech-heavy background, so you touched all of this stuff. Let's go back to the beginning a little bit here. How did you get involved in all of this? Are you like an inner geek at heart like the rest of us who are tech-obsessed? What was the road there? When did you decide you wanted to even start pursuing technology?
I don't know if it was ever an actual realization. It was like my generation were the first ones that came into the world where we had TRS-80s and Atari boxes, and we were introduced to Pong as the first video game, quote unquote. When I was at UCLA, it was the first Mac 2 that we did majority of the work on. So ultimately, understanding technology for what it was one thing. Number two, being from San Francisco and Silicon Valley definitely accelerated the adoption pattern. Ultimately, though, I do have an inner tech geek streak to me. I am in no way, shape, or form an engineer. Anyone that hears me claim engineering status should disregard because I am just a simple sales guy. But I'm constantly amazed and excited about the state of technology. Who can develop what worldwide today is stunning. You mentioned for a brief stint, I was at Max Play, and I was amazed at the guts and the internals of gaming systems and the amount of data they had to process, gamification theory, everything. So I look at technology, I'm fascinated what it can do. But that being said, I've been a small business owner. I've worked with businesses around the world, and ultimately technology is only as good as how you implement it and what return it gets you at the end of the day. So at every step of the way, I've tended to be bleeding edge on things. Yet my goal is the cool thing about what I get to do is I get to work with our customers and say, what makes you better? And 9 times out of 10 today, for better or for worse, it's going to involve technology. It might not be our technology. It's going to involve technology. So let's have the discussion. Let's figure out how to get someone from point A to point B and whatever better means to them. More profit, more efficiency, more customer service, better employee happiness, whatever that is. It's an awesome conversation to have each and every day.
I like it, Adam. A man that's wiser than me once said that you don't really start getting old until you stop learning. So the pursuit of knowledge is the fountain of youth in and of itself. We mentioned Hulft, and before we even leave Hulft, because we got your background there, I have a couple questions. I'm looking at their website right now, and I especially have some on the Japanese side and about Japanese supply chain, but first, let's start with Hulft. Hulft is talking about a problem that we see all the time, especially as shippers and carriers start getting more interested in data and understanding its power. Hulft's website says, Hulft finds, secures, organizes, and transforms information. Well, information is data. How important is data to the supply chain, and how can Hulft help shippers manage it?
First and foremost, I can't claim, nor I will claim to be an expert on supply chain in and of itself. But with regards to any business today, and like I said, the sheer fact of the matter is information technology is at the root, the heart of basically every system in the United States, unless you're out chopping woods in the backwoods of Alaska or someplace and put it on a truck. But even once you put it on the truck, now you got an invoice, you've got a bill of lading, you got various things. So from that perspective, around the world, data and especially electronic data is going to be critical and crucially involved in what you do. I claim that, within Silicon Valley, there's a lot of very sexy technologies out there. You mentioned AI and IoT and all this stuff, but ultimately for what we do, we're plumbing. We're down connecting legacy stuff. And what I see within the logistics industry or supply chain industry is that most companies have been around for 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years, longer than that. And when you've been around that long, the founders didn't start the business saying, we're going to be awesome at this one thing. They started the business saying, I have a competency. I've got 2 trucks, or I've got a sawmill. They've got something, and it grows up over time. And when you grow up over time, you end up with, like any other business out there, any other family out there. You got legacy operations, you got legacy systems. But in today's world, it's now I've got all these things and they work for my billing, they work for my warranties, they work for this, that, the other thing. But now my customers in a B2B mode or a B2C mode, my customers are being bombarded on a daily basis in their personal lives with expectations of, I heard this at a Vegas conference, by a logistics conference. It's the Amazon effect, right? I expect transparency. I expect efficiency. I expect my cost to be driven down. How do you get there if your main line of business is not IT, but ultimately it's the data that needs to be exposed somehow, and you need to be efficient? So, going back to my comment, I love to have these conversations with business owners. The business owners we deal with all the time, it's saying, hey, you understand that your customers, if you don't provide them a better level of service, they may go elsewhere. You may expect that others in your industry aren't going to adapt at pace, but if you provide better service, once again, how do we make you better? If you provide better customer service, it's going to rely upon the data. How do you have access to your data without being IT experts? You need a partner in it one way or the other. We're a technology company, yes, but ultimately we like to think of, after 10,000 customers around the world and hundreds of use cases, we can help our customers avoid some of the pitfalls that we've seen throughout the years. And once again, I would like to say I'm a gray hair guy, but I'm far more no hair than gray hair. It's how do we all succeed in this together and provide a winning solution that both satisfies how do you make you better and both make someone more efficient to hand off to the next generation.
When I'm not behind this mic, my other role is as the director of marketing for Aborn and Company. And over there, I do a lot of their decks and I look at presentations, and I have a background in operations and sales as well. So I'm very familiar with what I'm looking at. And in this role, I often feel like I'm a life coach for people's supply chains, because you mentioned something. A lot of supply chains are in states of disrepair, and there's a lot of duct tape and a lot of leaky pipes. You're out there now too. So you're out there, and this is interesting because you don't really have a background in supply chain. Yours is in tech. However, you are the vice president of sales for Hulft. So how do you go about selling this stuff? What are you solving, and what are you hearing from the market?
Well, if you ask my boss, I could always be selling a bit more, but within the term of sales, and I grew up in a sales family. My father was in sales. My brother's in sales. I'm in sales. And sales, like anything else, it's a profession. And to me, the heart of the profession is you have to be curious. You have to have an innate inquisitive nature to find out that central question. What makes a potential customer better? What is it about their operations? What is it about their customer set? And where I can relate from my background, doing sales worldwide, dealing with anyone out there understands a sales chain, and you can go buy a computer from Best Buy, or you have a system integrator, or you have a reseller that comes in and sells you copiers and other things in your business. Most of these little channels, the resellers of the world that end up helping companies, once again, they didn't start off from being IT specialists. They started off from having a core competency. I know how to install Windows 95 on your box and secure it. And from there, they found out, now I've got 20 customers. I need 10 more employees. They weren't trained on the intrinsic art of running a business, understanding what credit was, everything else. And so when I look at supply chain, I look at manufacturing, what excites me just intrinsically is every day now I pass trucks on the road. And I look at a truck, and I no longer see a truck as a truck. I see a truck as a truck in and of itself is a composition of 30,000 parts in and of itself. 30,000 parts that are supplied through tier 2, tier 3 suppliers into a tier 1 that makes up the truck. But that truck now has to be sold through distribution. Distribution has dealership. It has everything else. But not only that, now the truck has a load on it, right? And that load has a manifest, a bill of lading, but someone had to load on that stuff to that truck from a warehouse. And everywhere I turn this cube, I see areas where automation in and of itself could probably drive efficiency. Whether or not efficiency drives profits, I can't speculate. One would imagine it would. But ultimately, as my team and I, we're going out into the flyover country, quote unquote. I said I lived in Kansas City, so I'm allowed to refer to it that way. Once you get outside of Silicon Valley or the depths of New York, I mean, these are old line businesses where they might not have a CIO. They might not have someone that manages the global vision of what their technology systems are. But ultimately, who are they going to trust for having a conversation that might lead to advice, that might lead to a quote unquote sale? It's someone that will vouch and verify, saying, hey, look, you've got this thing. We've seen it. We've done it. We care about you, simply because you're feeding up into our other larger customer sets that are now requiring you to talk to their newer purchasing systems. So how are we going to help you survive and thrive? But what's the risk? So from a sales guy angle, it's always, can we have an honest conversation with someone where they take a look at myself or my team or Hulft and say, what makes them think we understand what their risk is better than somebody else? And that just goes back to, as you said, I've got a varied experience of personal life history where I love having conversations. And even if it doesn't lead to a sale, it leads to hopefully some more knowledge within my particular gray matter that will come in handy for someone else.
All right, you have to answer a question for me, because I'm really curious. In my career, I've only had 1 or 2 Japanese clients, and they were really, really big companies. So I'm curious, though, have you learned so far, are there any inherent differences between the way US supply chains are run and the way Japanese supply chains are run, or the way business is done? I'm curious if they're a mess around the world, or if it's just a US thing.
I would say that there are systemic issues, how companies get formed and grow, and then there are cultural issues between countries. And I had the good fortune, I actually went to an American high school in Japan, so I was exposed to a lot of this as far as the Japanese business culture when I was younger. And within the Japanese culture, Japanese society, obviously, I think it's a well-known thing that the concept of risk is viewed in a much greater prism than in the United States society, and that failure is deemed far greater an issue within that culture than it is in an entrepreneurial society, much more like in the United States, at least traditionally. So the ability to adapt and to change, number one, is a lot slower pace, because it's always viewed in the context of the risk, not only to the company itself, but of its partners and who it feeds up to. So in that vein, like I said, when I was recruited by Hulft, I inherently understood, because my previous startups, it was always a new product, a new category. You mentioned biometrics, whether it was biometrics, IoT, encryption. it was always a new product category, a new thing to market. It was the traditional U.S. startup that got funded by VCs, and it was a high risk, high reward play. When I looked at Hulft, and I understood the basis of saying the Japanese financial industry is 100% saturation for Hulft software. And if you get that, and you have that as a basis, while other countries might not understand exactly what that means, I did. And because of that, I could stand in front of everyone and say, look, if Hulft is trusted by the Japanese financial industry and now by extension manufacturers, et cetera, I can guarantee you one thing. This stuff, it works, it's solid, it's secure, because there's no way you get to be on the market where our parent company is without full and absolute trust that we are zero risk to a business. Now, translating that into supply chain, and again, name some of the bigger players, whether it's MOL or NYK, et cetera, they're all Hulft customers. So again, as we're branching out here in the United States and we're having extensive conversations with our existing customers in the United States, it's trying to figure out what they're doing. And you had mentioned newer technologies like blockchain, et cetera, and us trying to understand where we fit in that world. But ultimately, to answer the heart of the question, is there a difference? The difference is, I would say, on both sides of the house, looking at that, not top tier of the market, but looking at second and third tier, it's all about risk management and cash flow, and ultimately looking at these new developments in the market, whether it be in Amazon or blockchain, et cetera, and everyone's saying, I don't know what it is. And if I don't know what it is, and I can't put my finger exactly what the value proposition is, that means that there's risk. And if there's risk, someone had better well explain to me what level of risk there is to achieve what level of benefit for my business.
See, now that you told me that you went to an American high school in Japan, in my head, your teenage years were like Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift.
So if you don't drift to win, what do you drift for?
I don't know if you've seen that movie. It's my favorite Fast and the Furious movie, but kid who's like, he likes to ride hot rods around. He gets in trouble, so he gets sent to go live with his dad in Japan. Then when he gets there, he runs afoul of some bullies, but ultimately, I don't want to spoil the movie, but it kind of follows a Karate Kid formula. He gets trained in drifting, drifting cars. Have you ever drifted a car before?
Intentionally, no, but I can state this definitively for the record. Thank goodness my colleagues and I often talk amongst ourselves and say that there was no such thing as a cell phone camera when we were in high school in Japan, because that would have been no bueno at this stage of our lives. So it was, there was a lot of Fast, Furious, and other things that may have not been directly related to automobile drifting, but other activities, most likely so. But there is no visual evidence, so therefore we are exonerated by lack of evidence.
All right, I'm not sure if I want to open the door to that reality, so let's talk about a different kind of reality right now. Let's talk about AR and VR. That's augmented reality and virtual reality. And we'll talk about being a teenager again. When I was a teenager in the 90s,
whatever,
I remember that like VR was supposed to be the shizzle, but all it did was fizzle, right? You would go to the arcade, they had one, and it was really interesting. There was a really long line, but it was like $15 to play like one game for 2 minutes. And while it was interesting, it was really blocky. The gameplay wasn't great. I know that now we have Oculus Rift, and there's other options in the VR scene and AR. People have seen on apps, augmented reality apps, but they're not really solutions. They're kind of like 3D TV, right? Like there's one extra step. You got to put on the glasses, or you got to pull out the phone. Where are we, though, with those technologies? You have a little bit more intimate knowledge than I do of my sort of cursory knowledge.
I do on two levels. Number one, on a personal level, I have a 10-year-old son. And the future he's going to be afforded is going to be amazing from a lot of technologies. But looking at the state of VR today, and the reason why VR sucked previously is number one, computational power. How do you manage all the graphics, et cetera, and make that a constantly turning world? And if you take a look at one of the more popular games these days, Fortnite, I mean, it is...
Fortnite! What the point of building? What you going night?
It is an amazing amount of data that's being crunched, et cetera, into real-time scenarios. So VR, for me, understanding the guts of it is stunning as to the amount of data. the data crunching is really critical. But then second, from a personal angle, VR eliminates the requirement for geographical proximity. That today you could go to a school in Lagos, Nigeria, Adelaide in Australia, or you could go to Warsaw, Poland, and you could offer school kids the ability to go meander around the pyramids in Egypt without physically going there, knowing that 0.00001% might ever achieve going there. And so now you've made learning far more accessible and interactive, and eventually the economic models will follow on that. From a business angle, VR in a healthcare setting is stupendous. Even today in Japan, they're using VR and actually 3D modeling to perform open heart surgery before they actually do it on an actual patient. And if you go to LifeLeak and others, their training mechanisms in both VR and now crossing over to augmented reality are amazing. And then you look at Intel and PTC ThingWorks and what Vuforia is doing with the DAQRI glasses on. Now I'm a technician. I'm in front of a gearbox on an oil pipe. I put on my AR glasses immediately. I pull up my manual and my diagrams on my glasses. That's also now on my iPad or on my tablet. Now I'm no longer going through a physical reference manual. And where I see this is the crossover to bring it back to supply chain and logistics and this general industry. Most of the customers that we talk to, just by dint of being manufacturing and logistics, they're out from the major city centers, right? They're 50 clicks outside of Charlotte. They're 30 miles outside of Indiana. They are not in the population heavy centers of the world. And because today's world, as we mentioned previously in this thing, are data driven, my staff has to become more IT savvy, not just the IT staff, but my folks in general have to be more IT savvy about stuff. The question is, how do I find staff? How do I find people that know anything that want to go work 30 miles outside of Indianapolis or 50 miles outside of Charlotte that would rather A, work in a city, B, they'd rather work on something that's completely driven on tablets that they don't have to worry about green screens, dot matrix printer, all that stuff. The staffing issue in hard industries across the United States is going to reach a critical level as far as folks knowing how to run stuff. And so part of the conversations we have with our customers, it's not just VR, AR, but it's ultimately, how do you take all your legacy stuff that still works, right? You're still tracking, you're still shipping, but that new generation coming up that's going to fill in these spaces, they want it all represented on a tablet. The customers want it represented on a tablet. How do you get it from here to there? How do you take something that's running on a 30-year-old mainframe and make it tablet ready? So once again, me being a techno geek at heart, I look at all that and say, well, we can solve that. But as a business, how many businesses realize that their next generation of workers expect all of this stuff to be presented in the format they've grown up with? They grew up with mom and dad had cell phones. They had a cell phone. Their first learning tool was a tablet. How do you get from here to there? Right? That's the challenge.
Well, I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and they get pissed off at things when it's not a touchscreen. Like, they look at, like, the TV like it's ancient. They're like, what, you can't touch this screen? Like, what is this, Like, it's an old black and white TV or something. Like, just a useless piece of junk. But that's, like, the expectation of them, because I don't know if you've also seen, like, 2-year-olds, but they can figure out how to get into your tablet really quick. Mine was, like, calling 911, and it wasn't my fault, I swear to God. He was just trying to hack into the phone. It's amazing how quick they pick that up. But I'm sure, like, my parents thought the same thing when I was installing, like, CD-ROM drives into my, like, 286 compact. They're like, what is this kid doing? Is he building a bomb? I wasn't.
That's true. But look, I mean, once again, your experience in the industry in Aborn, I mean, look, you got far more experience than I do. And look, whenever I need a sanity check, I call Brian Glick from Chain.io, or I call Sarah Barnes, from Let's Talk Supply Chain. And I'm like, I don't know this, but I'm imagining, once again, the majority of these businesses, not top tier, but the majority, they might not realize that this is coming, or they might begin to realize it's coming. It's coming, but what are their choices? They can't rip out everything that's there, and all these people that tell them, yeah, just move everything to cloud. Well, that's not so straightforward, because what staff do I got to move what to cloud, and what does that mean? What's the risk? And even when I'm in the hiring line and I need people now to run my customer service, customer support, they're staring at a screen that is 10 years old. It's not the new LED based screen, and it's not shiny. And as you pointed out, it's not touch screen. Now I know I have to know how to click and go through stuff. It's coming, right? It can't be stopped. This is going to happen.
I try to think of like VR all the time from the perspective of supply chain. And like one of the practical use cases that I can imagine with VR is grocery shopping. And I say that because I don't know if you've ever online grocery shopped, but it's not like shopping for other things. And I think it's almost like clothing shopping too. Clothing shopping or grocery shopping, if you don't know exactly what you want and what's on your list, it's kind of a lot different than your real in-person experience. I know, like, I go to the grocery store with, like, 2 or 3 things in mind to get. Then when I get in there, I leave with everything but those 2 or 3 things. Usually, like, just grabbing a basket, being optimistic about how instead of, like, walking out with, like, things under my arms and bags of chips hanging from my mouth. It's not a good scene. But I could totally see, like, a practical use case for VR in there. But you know what stands in the way is the device, right? You have to get those into people's hands and into people's homes for them to really use them.
I would say yes, but to me, the physical device that's a finance model. It's like a cable box. Right? How do you finance that? Ultimately, though, for VR, AR, warehouse systems, logistics, the trick of this, at least in my estimation, and obviously I'm in the business, but the trick of it is to make anything of value. There is, in my opinion, there is no one magical system of data that gives you everything that I would call back in some of the government days actionable intelligence. And here it's how do you make useful decisions based off of data? And this is the issue with IoT, right? IoT, it's been around far longer than anyone understands. I mean, Cisco here in the United States was the first company to say, oh, it's a $20 billion market, all this stuff. But ultimately, I could put a sensor on anything. I can monitor the data from that sensor, and that's great, whether it's monitoring heat or vibration or whatnot. But that data in and of itself is fairly useless, right? I could have 100 sensors send me with data, but only when I correlate that data with 3 other data sources can I then make an analysis of it on the baseline. Then if I want to throw artificial intelligence onto it, that's another layer. And I go back to who has the staff to do any of these things. But in the conversations that we have with our customers, and we're going to be showing this down at there's a Scope conference, supply chain gig down in Atlanta in early March. And we're demonstrating how we can take, for ourselves, take data off of an old mainframe, take data off of a simple handheld scanner from a warehouse dock, take an IoT sensor, marry it up into one screen, so at least you have actionable intelligence. So with VR, AR, all of these things, looking at it from a consumer entertainment perspective, it's one thing. Looking at it from a shopping perspective, it's now I got to take the dimensions, I got to take the lighting, I've got to take what's my inventory. How do I make this all relevant to somebody, including their body type, and then add morphology into it? Going back into the corporate realm, though, looking at what View4 is doing with the daiquiri glasses. Now I've got my technicians going out to the field. My technician doesn't know crap about this older PLC or these conduits that they're working on. That said, when they're in front of one thing, they can put this thing on. It understands what they're looking at. It pulls up the manual, and my technician hopefully has been trained enough to know how to RTFM to fix the issue without knowing the actual device that they're working on, because now I've put the information in actionable intelligence in front of them that's marrying up their current situation, their current location, the current blueprints with the most recent current data manual that goes into it. And in our business, the question becomes, how do you take all those data sources in the least amount of time, merge them into something that provides actionable intelligence to do a job function? And that's the basis of when we go out and we talk to logistics, supply chain manufacturers. They may have 20 systems. They may have 400 systems. What drives the business process flow to achieve a grain of data to allow an action that then has a business ramification towards it.
Well, it's really interesting you bring this all up because as you're talking, it's making me think about blockchain. Blockchain, massively hyped or overhyped perhaps for the past 2 years. Right now, in the logistics space with blockchain, the problem is that there's a lot of fragmentation as everyone is sort of catfighting over which protocol to use. Different carriers don't want to use each other's formats. It's not a good scene right now. But the thing is, the hype around blockchain is kind of funny because when you move the clouds and you look at what blockchain is, all it is like an immutable ledger. If you think of a table, it's like it's a document next to a document. It's not like this cure-all. It's a huge pain in the butt for your regular shipper. It totally makes sense for, chain of custody, like insurance. Things like that, where you really it could go to a lawyer, it could go to court, or like pharma or food, where you could actually get sued if food came from the wrong place, or you have some sort of supply chain where you publicly want people to know you're green sourcing, like the Palm supply chain. These are places where it's gaining traction. But you mentioned IoT. What about a blockchain that is just a collection point for IoT sensors? So each sensor is a chain within the blockchain, so it can collect all that data, and then that data can be brought into a TMS environment or some sort of more useful environment where all this stuff can be, put to some use. I mean, like people say data a lot of times, but data is just information and it doesn't really mean anything. It's like, it's just throwing a bunch of words at the wall or zeros and ones. You have to put meaningful context behind it.
So here's, and again, being from the Valley, blockchain from a sketch on a napkin, the first issue it actually solved, which once again, it manifested itself into a use case on top of blockchain philosophy, and that was Bitcoin. And Bitcoin was, how can we easily move some sort of currency between countries? And look, my recent count, I've been to 55 countries worldwide, and I've seen the best, the worst, everything you can do with banking systems, et cetera. And when you talk about, I need to transfer $100,000 overseas, and if I need to do that via a bank or Western Union, it's going to cost me $1,000. If I use Bitcoin, quote unquote, it's a negligible thing. So from that particular use case, then it became, okay, what else can the underlying philosophy of blockchain be used for? Now, again, I'm an enterprise software guy. Blockchain was never meant from a reference architecture to be enterprise. It was, as you pointed out, it's an immutable ledger system, which has applicability in a few things, but because it was never meant to be enterprise, it was never meant, whatever implementation was put on top of it was not meant to commingle. And again, Brian Glick and I have had a lot of conversations about this because Chain.io actually has a functioning blockchain implementation for logistics, is that now, unless I get a huge consortium like the Maersk consortium, IBM, et cetera, unless I try to get a huge consortium to adopt my implementation, then it will never talk to each other. So within that, my first question is, what's the value proposition against something else? Second, I mean, I know the Walmart tracking food and stuff. Okay, great, but they're going to pass the cost along. Second, what's the actual business impact in the next 5 years? Third, which medium-sized company has any talent whatsoever to, number one, understand not only the basis of the technology, the basis of the implementation, the basis of the workflow, and how this thing's actually going to make a business impact. In my gut, I'm saying at this stage, like a lot of technologies that come out of the Valley, give it time to breathe. Give it 10 years for people to fail on it. And when they fail on it, okay, you learn from it, you move on, and you work with an actual implementation that works. But I would not want to be personally, hype aside, a first mover on this. And look, even for Hulft, I mean, Hulft, we got, 500 adapters out in the world. Now we got a blockchain adapter. What does that mean? Well, the heart of it means nothing aside from if you're trying to do blockchain, talk to us and we'll figure out how to make it work. But if I'm a company, I'm really wondering, what does my IT staff know or what they don't know? Who am I interacting with? And if I need to now adopt a new partner 3 months down the line and they're using a different implementation, I can't get from here to there. So ultimately, what's the value that this is providing me unless it's a Walmart or unless it's someone that's forcing you to do it? And as we found out, we found this out in the automotive industry, right? We currently have, I said, the top blue chip automotive companies use us. And a lot of these companies are now looking at their own EDI systems, right? Electronic data interchange that they've used for purchasing for 30 years. And they are now modifying this to be web enabled. So it's new APIs, the rest of the stuff. So they're rolling out new things and saying, okay, supply chain, you want to deal with us? You're now going to adopt all these systems to our new API. So we get real time tracking on all this stuff. And supply chain's looking at them and saying, A, we don't know how to get from here to there. But B, unless you're going to pay us to do it, we're not going to do it because what's our advantage? So to me, blockchain as, like I said, as a fundamental philosophy, it's great. I got a fundamental philosophy on cash flow and cash flow margins. That's great. But from a company to company, it's going to be different. And if I'm running a company, I'm going to ask the centralized question of, what's my risk of not doing this at the moment? What's my benefit of doing it at the moment? And what's my total cost of doing this at this moment? I guarantee you, just like IoT, Cisco was out promoting the hell out of IoT. And when companies actually found out how much it costs to implement an IoT system, including all the network connectivity, et cetera, a lot of CFOs said, what the heck? This is going to cost me this much for what benefit? Who can tell me what this is? Look, one of my previous companies was sold off to GE Digital. GE Digital needed Predix to work. GE Digital was gutted. GE Digital was just sold to someone else because IoT, in certain instances, it's great, but across the board, people are still trying to figure out what is my actual hard ROI from this. Can I actually do predictive maintenance? And same thing with blockchain. Okay, it can do this, but who's demanding it? Right? That's the same thing with all these technologies. It comes back down to, if I got to pay for it out of my pocket, you better tell me I'm making $10 back for every dollar I spend. If not, why am I doing it?
Yeah, let's talk about AI for a second, too. So, like, artificial intelligence. A lot of what's being called AI now, though, is really a lot closer to machine learning than any type of self-aware Skynet system, for better or worse. But, I've met a few warehouse robots recently, and I've yet to meet one that can pass the Turing test.
Yeah. Well, it's buzzwords for buzzwords' sake. One of the things I appreciate about Hulft and the funding that we're getting from the U.S. here from our parent company is I don't have to play the dance of, we're going back to our VC investors and having to dance the dance of we're buzzword centric, right? And ultimately, what is the common definition differential, the delta between machine learning and AI? It's semantics, and it's semantics amongst very few people who actually care. Machine learning for me, like I said, my aforementioned company that was sold off to GE Digital, machine learning and AI were used interchangeably in the sense of operational technology data. There's two types of main data in the world. There's structured data in the IT world that's like spreadsheets and lovely clean data, and then there's operational technology data that's coming off of manufacturing lines and PLCs, et cetera. It's unstructured. And how do you make a data model, right? If I need to understand my data, I need a data model. And I mean, few people remember this, but the first application that actually made PCs palatable to the general populace was VisiCalc back in the late 70s, early 80s. VisiCalc was the first spreadsheet that would actually take your data and make it lovely, clean, and make it useful. So within AI and machine learning just means how can you use inherent algorithms and something to learn something better than humans can learn at a faster rate. AI actually in the medical space, everyone's trying to figure out, are these algorithms, depending on how they're trained, making better decisions than physicians because they're taking in, like IBM Watson, I have every bit of cancer research in the world today. As IBM Watson, I can crunch it. So you give me a symptom and I can crunch every data source and provide you an answer much quicker than anything else. AI and machine learning, though, it's the inherent thing everyone needs to understand about it is it's the same thing with every data source, whether it's a simple invoice or advice from a friend. It's garbage in, garbage out. That within AI and machine learning, they're based on their algorithms. So it's a mathematical equation that should be logical, but you have to train these things. So you need training data. When I was back in biometrics was using a human, something that you have on you, a fingerprint, et cetera, an iris, a face, and matching it either one-to-one against something that was taken from you previously or matching it against a known database. Well, in order to make facial recognition work, not for your iPhone where I take a photo of me and it recognizes me, but using this to say I take a photo of me and now it's matching me against a wanted list of 10,000 people, I have to train that system on how to go and look at features and identify to a probability of success. It will never be one-to-one success. It has to be a probability. Same thing with artificial intelligence today. The concept is how much training data, who's doing the training, how is this coming up with something necessary? So I look at it again in my basis of truth every morning when I wake up. If you sell to Fortune 100 companies, the issue is you got 100 companies to sell to. And those companies, they pay attention to the Gartner reports, they pay attention to IDC, all these things. But you got 100. The main thing is, though, between Detroit and Atlanta, I've got 10,000 manufacturers and supply chain companies. And I would bet that 9,500 of those don't pay attention to market analyst reports. They don't pay attention to the latest trade magazines. They don't pay attention to buzzwords like RPA or AI or IoT. What they pay attention to is, what's the latest tariff that's causing an issue in my business? What are my customers requesting us to do in order to retain their business? I can't hire enough people to do data processing. How do I get around this thing? And that, for me, once again, for our current customer set, Hulft, our 10,000 customers strong, they look to us to come in and explain, just like you're asking, what are these things, right? We hear this stuff. What does it actually mean? And then for the customer sets we're going to have to hear in the United States, us coming out of the Valley, and we just opened up our Detroit office this week, it's how can we have this conversation with our customers saying, look, ultimately, it's your pennies involved. We want to be a partner. We're a vendor partner. I mean, we want your pennies for us. That's like, I got payroll to make too. But ultimately, if I can help explain to a customer, regardless of the buzzword and the technology, if I can explain how they're going to get 10x return on any dollar spent, I bet the owner of the business, the CFO of the business, whoever's counting the pennies, they'll be rational enough to want to have that conversation. Whether or not they want us as a partner, hey, that's up to them. But to have that conversation, that to me that's what I love about doing the job that I do is going out and talking with folks and saying, let's find out, do you got a problem? Can we solve the problem? If we can't solve the problem, can I introduce you to someone who solves the problem? Right? That's the heart of the matter.
Well, tech, it can cut both ways. I don't know if you were following the trucking space last year, but there was a driver shortage, massive capacity crisis, record high rates, and a lot of it stemmed back to, or initially it was blamed to be these ELDs, the electronic logging devices, was supposed to cut into carrier time. But a funny thing happened. Carriers started to realize that these ELDs keep a constant stream of data that they can collect. And part of that data that they can collect is on dwell times at shippers' docks. So suddenly, now they have great visibility on which shippers are making terrible partners by tying up capacity and keeping their drivers at the docks for hours. Now another funny thing is happening. Uber Freight, now they're allowing truckers to rate shipping facilities just as a passenger would rate a driver. In an Uber car, there's Doc 411. That's really putting the power back in the hands of carriers, which was, kind of a disrespected industry. Shippers just looked at them as a necessary evil.
Ain't that awesome? I just got to say, the techno geek in me and says, you solved one problem you did great, but just exposing that stuff and using it in a different way.
Brilliant, right?
I've been married a long time, and my wife often laments that I am who I am working for the type of companies I work for, and that I've never come up with a brilliant idea in my life. I can commercialize the technology to everyone's get out, but coming up with that, but you slap yourself on your head and you're like, well, now that I've got this data, what can I do with it, right? But that's an imagination thing. And that's the other exciting thing for us going out to market is saying, look, once you can mash up 3 or 4 different data things, what line of business can you do? And I pointed out to you when we introduced ourselves, a week and a half back, is that I understood Port of Oakland, which, by the way, I mean that was the Port of Oakland was stemmed from San Francisco unions and the finger peers getting audacious. So the Port of Oakland helped spur the whole container shipping thing in the world. And Port of Oakland, I guess a month ago, was the first port to publicly release what is the turnaround times for trucks inside of the port. Now, I'm not a logistics guy. I don't claim to know anything aside from I'm guessing that's pretty valuable data for anyone that has a hard asset, including paying for either the asset, paying for the fuel, paying for the driver, paying for the wait time, paying for whatever that is. If I can marry that data up, probably with 2 or 3 other things, that might give me visibility that now turns into some hard dollars on the return. Now for me, I don't know what that is. That's why I reached out to you and to others to say, what is this? But like you said, Uber Freight and these other folks, once you can track, once you can monitor, once you can expose, that's where the innovators come in. The innovators say, well, now it's the peanut butter and the chocolate hit each other, and you had a glass of red wine. Now you got yourself something special. That to me is, once again, it's a fascinating thing of asking people, what do you perceive? How do you think you get better? Right? Is it customer service? Is it your efficiency? Is it the use of your assets? I don't know what it is, and I expect in the next 10 years it's going to become more awesome. The whole trucker thing, I don't know where in the United States or when in the United States we started to denigrate blue collar jobs, but when Walmart's offering $90,000 a year for long haul truck drivers, that's spurring 2 things. Number one, it should spur a bunch of high school students to get their driver's licenses for long haul trucks. But second, it's spurring the investment into driverless long haul trucks, which means they're going to be electric trucks, which means now I got this whole other thing I need to do infrastructure for. It's a cascading thing, but in 10 years, you're not going to stop this, right? You're not going to stop the expectation of customers in the business sense saying, when I'm at home, I use Amazon, I got all this information at my fingertips. Why don't I have it in my business? And you're not going to stop Amazon from looking at a business like it did with AWS and saying, I can do this much easier, much better, disrupt the crap out of it, and put a bunch of people out of business because a bunch of people don't understand what it is to have customer service that's meaningful. So, like I said, for me, looking at this industry, I've sold into deep, dark governments. I've sold into hospitals. I've sold into financial institutions. This whole manufacturing, supply chain, logistics is fascinating for me, simply because I'm learning every day. And these people, literally, in my estimation, they're what America was built on, what it runs on, getting goods to market one way or the other. It's amazing.
Yeah, you know what, too? What fascinates me, I mean, those 2 professions, over-the-road trucking and the guys who crew steamship lines, who have to go from Shanghai to Boston or Shanghai to California, because there's something just so, like, primal and ancestral about those jobs. The mode of transportation changes throughout history, but, like, it seems like deep down in our core, in our blood, there have always been those people with the need to just travel, even if it's travel for occupation, and even if it's traveling to similar places over and over again, that like nomadic lifestyle. I don't know if I could do it, but it sure as hell fascinates the crap out of me.
I have a few colleagues that work steamer tramp ships in the South Pacific, and there's some great storylines. But even with, like I said, even with the shipping industry, and now they're doing, once again, the electric ships, but it's all about cargo management. And again, I can't claim to know a lot about it, except being in the number of countries I've been to and seeing just the, as you said, primal modes of transportation with, people with stuff on their heads or a tuk-tuk in Thailand carrying, 80 boxes of stuff. Or as I related to you, previously, driving through the border of Ukraine and Poland and seeing literally a 3-day backlog of heavy duty trucks waiting just to do paperwork at a border. And once again, part of that, it's not really a technology thing. It's more of a border paperwork thing, but that's another whole entire area where I'm excited to learn about with global trade management and, in the United States, the foreign trade zones, all of these things. So, at the beginning of the call, you asked me, my background in technology, and I'm a little bit a different cat than you're used to interviewing who's an expert on a particular industry. My expertise, if I have one, and this is debated worldwide, it's looking at any technology and saying, what is the impact it could have on what type of business? And having been a small business owner back in the 2000s, I made a decision that I thought was awesome at the time. And 2 years later, I said, you know what? Owning a restaurant as a part-time gig, it's not as easy or as glorious as it looks. But it taught me a valuable lesson as to what's not just corporate cash flow, but what is small business cash flow? What is small business staffing issues? What are regulations that you have to file stuff over and over for? So these pain points, I take a look at them and say, if we can eliminate it, what is the hard ROI?
Adam, we're near the end. We're near the end of the haunt. I was going to say the roller coaster, but this might have been more like a haunted house.
Sounds like a Doors song to me. The end, my friend.
Yeah,
yes.
or Westworld or something where the
Yes.
cowboy robots will kill us all. But I had a question. So you've been all over the place. You've been all over the world. You've been in Japan. You were doing the Tokyo drifting, or maybe you weren't. That's in my head now. But
Why did you let me race with your car? You knew I was going to wreck it.
do you get a quick war story you can share with us? Did you almost die on the road? I mean, what's something? Do you almost commit seppuku for failing the Japanese? Give me one story to leave us with.
Well, obviously, throughout the years and the miles, I've had the good fortune of many intriguing circumstances and incidents. Name the continent, and I've had the benefit of being there, which at the time may have been scary as hell or may have been just exhilarating. I will say this just once again for the purpose of this conversation and relating back to my years in Japan, going to a high school literally in Japan and being immersed in Japanese society, even though it was the American school, we had 70 different nationalities represented. And the core thing that you learn as an American kid overseas when our parents work for foreign nationals is that if you screw up in the United States, right, if you do Tokyo drift in Milwaukee and you get caught, okay, you get whatever punishment you're going to get. But if you do something severely punishable in foreign countries, especially in a country like Japan, number one, that reflects not only upon yourself, that reflects upon you as a representative of the United States. Second, the likelihood that your parents will get placed somewhere else very rapidly is an absolute certainty, simply because now all of a sudden you've brought shame onto whatever situation you're in. But all of that being said, I can distinctly remember many, many, many times that living in Tokyo as a kid of 13 to 17 years old, it was the first country I lived in where you would look up at a signboard in a train station. You didn't have Roman language, right? You couldn't read it, right? It was symbols, characters, kanji, katakana, hiragana. And the amount of times you'd look up and you'd be lost, but then would come over some Japanese grandmother or some Japanese businessman and see that you were obviously lost, and they would use their limited English to help you out, get to where you need to be. It just showed to me, which I've learned living around the world and being around the world, people around the world, 99% of us are exactly the same way, in our own way. We want the lives of our kids to be better than the lives we got today. We're willing to go out of our way to be host and guest for someone that seems lost. We will do whatever we can to make someone feel comfortable if they feel lost or scared or whatever it is. And like I said, after being in 55 different countries, in jungles and deserts, in major cities, what I have found to be true is the basic human spirit, when you take politics out of it and you take all the rest of this crap out of it, is that we all behave in the same way, that somehow we want people, when they experience us, to have a better outcome than if they didn't experience us. And that every day when I'm not only dealing overseas, but dealing with places in the United States, it's that same thing of, I want to make someone's life better simply because so many people throughout the world have made my life better. It's an incremental thing. It's a dramatic thing, whatever it is. we're all on this, as they say, the third rock from the sun together. And every day, how do we pop up in the morning? And whether it's our kids, our spouses, our partners, our customers, how do we make their life incrementally better? Because if I can make one person happy during the day, I'm ahead of the game.
All right. Not exactly the story I was expecting. I was hoping a little bit more locked up abroad. That's all right, Adam. That was very wholesome. And that
Never self-incriminate there, Tim. Never self-incriminate.
No, I know. I'm just so much of a misanthrope sometimes that I just want to hear the misery.
Well, if I ever make it into Boston and we have one of those cold beverages that Boston's known for over one of those cups of clam thingies that Boston's known for, then maybe we'll expose something more in depth. But until then, if anyone's going to be at the Scope gig down in Atlanta, give me a ping because we'd love to hook up and meet, and maybe then we can expound upon the existentialism of life in foreign countries and various judicial systems. But until then, yes.
And throw your plugs out there, too. If someone listening wants to learn more about Hulft or more about Adam Erickson, how can they go and do so?
Visit us at Hulft Inc., HULFTINC.com. If you go to Hulft.com, that's our Japanese parent site. If you want to reach out to me, I am A. Erickson, AERICKSON, HulftInc.com, or look me up on LinkedIn. Always glad to, once again, have a conversation, expound upon the virtues of life in the big industries of manufacturing, supply chain, and logistics. Tim, definitely appreciate getting to know you and look forward. Hopefully in the near future, we can do a trilogy here between Sarah and Let's Talk Supply Chain, who I believe is going to be our media sponsor for our Detroit gig next week, and yourself, because I think you two are doing an amazing job trying to use this medium to get information out there in a way that folks can consume it and at least pick up a tidbit or two to find out what they want to know.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed this one too. This was a little bit of a different lane, as you mentioned, than usual, but I think that we did a decent job talking about some of the myths and some of the truths about the kaiju, that is, technology. Adam, thank you very much for your time today. Have an outstanding rest of the day and a great weekend.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it.
This is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey from Let's Talk Supply Chain, and you are listening to Consulting Logistics.
Now hiring. Excellent positions are available right now to work with an industry leader crafting cutting-edge, modern managed freight solutions. Look, guys, nobody can move the world alone. It takes creativity, curiosity, and collaboration between great people. Join Aborn and Company's Boston area team and be a part of their vision to rethink how shippers and carriers look at their global supply chain. They offer 30 years of traditional industry experience in a free-thinking, tech-friendly, startup environment that doesn't just encourage their clients' growth, but also the growth of their most important asset, their team. Choose to be extraordinary. Choose to be the architect of your career. Just visit abornandco.com, click on the Careers tab, and choose your own adventure today. We can't wait to work with you. Looking to modernize, digitize, and future-proof your supply chain? Visit day1.io for a free Day 1 Data Optimization Report. That's day, the number 0, the number 1.io. Isn't it time you got optimized? Announcing on October 10th, 2019, Aborn & Co. presents TransTech 2020, a supply chain vision and innovation conference. This event is the first of its kind in Boston. Join our panel of speakers from the worlds of logistics and technology as we discuss the modern needs of the supply chain and the merger between the physical and digital footprint that freight creates. Head on over to transtech2020.com for more details. We'll be talking about AI, automation, autonomous vehicles, blockchain, data purity and capture, future-proofing the supply chain, market conditions, transportation management systems, and so much more. Head on over to transtech2020.com for registrant and sponsor details. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, feel free to email me at tdooner@abornandco.com. That's TDOONER@abornandco.com. I'd be happy to learn something new with you. For this episode and all of our previous shows, visit consultinglogistics.io or simply search for Consulting Logistics on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player of choice. And hey, if you like the show, the best way you can give back is to share it. And if you really liked it, go on iTunes over there and rate and review. Be much appreciated. That's it. We are out of time. For Adam Erickson, I'm Tim Dooner, saying take care and happy shipping. I was actually asking my son the other day what he wanted to do when he grew up. And I said, do you want to design toys? Because he plays with Transformers all the time. And he shut me right down. He's 4, and he shut me right down. And he says, no, Dad, I'm going to build big, giant robots.